All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Anna and I'm here with Judge Nicole Bershon. Judge Bershon is a graduate from UCLA School of Law and was appointed to the Los Angeles Superior Court in 2013. And she currently serves as the Vice Chair of the California Association's Committee on Diversity and Inclusivity. So I want to give a big warm welcome to Judge Bershon. Our first question for you today is, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your profession?
Wonderful. Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for inviting me. And I sort of ascribe by the motto that if you build it, they will come. And if you see a problem that doesn't have a solution, you need to become the solution. And I'm going to give props to my new friend Reedy for starting this organization. I think it's amazing. When I was at UCLA Law School, we started a UCLA Women's Law Journal because we thought it was necessary, and it's still there 30 years later. So hopefully your organization will be around for 30 years. So thank you all for having me. I am my name is Nicole Bershon. I'm a judge at the Los Angeles Superior Court. I'm a trial court judge. I sit at the Torrance Courthouse where I am right now. I have a felony trial calendar, so I handle the most serious of the most serious. So rape, robbery, murder, child abuse, child molestation, you name it, I handle it. And I also do a number of post-conviction matters. I have been a judge for over 9 years. I was appointed by Governor Jerry Brown. And before that, I was a court commissioner for 2 years. Prior to that, I'll go a little backwards. I was the Inspector General for LAPD, which is a civilian oversight for LAPD. I was in that position for about 1.5 years, but I was with the office for over 9 years. I was an Assistant Inspector General for most of my time there, where I had the pleasure to serve under now District Court Judge Andre Barat, and also I replaced a person who's now a judge by the name of Samantha Phillips Chestner, who is my boss now because she is our incoming presiding judge. I say that all because you're going to hear this theme later on in my remarks, that this world is very small and you keep running into people along your career that maybe you worked with or before earlier, and you're going to see them again. So treat everyone really well, because you never know when you're going to run into them again. Prior to being at the Inspector General's office, I was at the Los Angeles City Attorney's office in a variety of units, both criminal and civil. For about 6.5 years, I was in the gang unit, nuisance abatement. I was in civil litigation. Prior to that, I was at 2 private firms in 3 years, and it took me 2 firms in 3 years to realize private practice was not for me. But I hope it's for some of you. It just wasn't for me at the time. I went straight through from college to law school, and then from law school to my first job. I did not clerk for a judge, though in retrospect, I wish I had. And that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you for that and the introduction. I know you touched upon your journey and the path that it took you to become a judge, as well as working in the private sector, but what made you fall in love and want to be a part of the law in general?
You know, I always, when people ask me, it was sort of by default. I didn't have a lot of direction at my college. People really went to 4 places. They went to medical school, and I didn't really like blood. They went into finance. I'm not particularly good at math. They went into accounting and engineering, see answer above. Or they went to law school, or business. They went to business school. I'm not good at math, so they went to law school. So law school was sort of by default. And I'm sort of realizing in retrospect that my college kind of focused all on that and didn't really have much of career counseling for sort of alternate paths. So law school was door number 4, seemed to make sense. I applied. I was going to spend a year in Asia prior to going to law school. My school had a program in Asia, all different countries. I was set to go to China, and this shows you how old I am, but a little history lesson. It was 1989, the Tiananmen Square incident occurred, and my program was canceled. And it was too late to get into another program because that happened in about May, and all the programs are full. So I just sort of expedited my entree into law school, and I started law school straight out of college. Again, I'm not sure in retrospect I would have done that, but So anyway, there I am at law school. I'm enjoying it. We start the Women's Law Journal. We have a very diverse class. I'm involved in Public Interest Law Foundation, doing all this great stuff. I think I'm going to be a public interest lawyer. And then I go work for a bankruptcy firm my first summer, and I had a great time, and they were wonderful people. And we were wined and dined, and it was wonderful. And I met some friends who are still friends to this day. And it didn't really sink in that bankruptcy was not really for me, because I was just having such a great time. And then my second summer, I went to another firm that was not a good fit. And so by my third summer, I needed a job, and the bankruptcy firm had given me an offer after my second summer. So I went there, and it took about a year and a half to realize that bankruptcy was not calling to me, and that's all the firm did. So I went to another firm where I thought I was going to do more litigation and employment litigation, and I wound up running their bankruptcy department as a second year. And the part of that practice that I really loved was I got to work on some white collar criminal defense matters with a gentleman by the name of Brian Hennigan, who is now the name partner in Hennigan in Houston, a wonderful man. And he said, look, if I could give you all my work and keep you busy full time, I would, but he just didn't have enough to keep an associate full time doing that. So I decided, you know what, this is it for me. And I took a 50% pay cut, which at the time we were not making the salaries we're all making now. And I went to the LA City Attorney's Office and never looked back. I'm not sure I answered your question, but anyway.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing your journey through law. Currently, you serve as the judge on the Los Angeles Superior Court, and I know as a judge, your day-to-day obligations probably vary. For our members who are interested in, becoming a judge in the future, what would you say your typical week is like?
Sure. So I do criminal. What there are upsides to having a criminal court, there are downsides. One of the biggest upsides is sort of the familiarity. It's sort of many of the same people. I have the same two public defenders who are assigned to my court. I have the same DA. Sometimes we have alternate public defenders. They're the conflict counsel with the public defender's office, same alternate public defenders, a lot of the same private defense counsel. It's a very small network. And, they talk about civility or lack of civility. It tends to be less civil in the civil courtrooms and more civil in the criminal courtrooms, because everybody's working together day after day after day. And that's nice. People fight because they have to, but they disagree without being disagreeable. And it just, as a judge, it's so much more rewarding to be able to focus on the law and the issues rather than personality squabbles. I hate when I have to be the preschool teacher. You go in your corner, stop squabbling, have a seat. That's not why I went to law school. That's why I became a parent, but that's not why I went to law school. So there's not very much of that. The parties are very, very professional, and that is very rewarding. So we do a lot of the same things. We have cases that are in various stages. So we have cases that are pre-trial. They're about to go to trial. Maybe they're early in the stages, the initial arraignment. We talk about that. Is there going to be bail? When are we going to set the trial? Then we have pre-trial matters. They're inching their way to trial, and there are discovery motions or other pre-trial motions. Then we have trial matters, which usually we do the majority in the afternoon, but some in the morning. And then I have a number of what they call post-conviction motions. There have been a number of changes in the criminal law, especially the last couple of years. And there's resentencing and revamping of the laws. So I have cases that involve inmates who've been in state prison for long periods of time, and they're coming back and we're relitigating certain issues in their cases. So it runs the gamut. And like for today, also, I'm on search warrant duties. So I may get an email saying you have to do a search warrant. So I'll take a break, swear a police officer over the phone, and we can do it all digitally. And I'll sign the search warrant or reject the search warrant digitally. We all help each other out here. So if one of my colleagues down in misdemeanors or another courtroom is out or they need help, I may go down there and cover their courtroom. So generally it's the same types of 3 or 4 types of cases, but in terms of what actually may happen on a given day, it can vary.
Thank you for that. And I think it's really enlightening to hear that as laws are always changing, that means that even if it's a case or a type of case that you've been working on often, it can be different. Kind of going along those lines, if possible, could you share some particular cases that were the most stressful or challenging for you?
Anytime somebody is looking at a very significant sentence, state prison sentence, whether it's 18 years or 20 years or 25 to life or life without the possibility of parole. I mean, we have cases that are eligible for the death penalty, but Governor Newsom has said during his administration, he's going to put a moratorium on the death penalty. So we're not really seeing too many death penalty cases, but anytime a case that's involving that kind of penalty is stressful on all sides. I mean, obviously it's stressful for the defendant and their attorneys because they're looking at the possibility of a significant term of incarceration, but usually when the penalties are so high, that means what's involved is usually so significant too. So there's victims or alleged victims who've been very traumatized, and that you have interests on both sides, and you want to make sure all the parties have a fair trial, and especially cases that involve children and children victims. Those are the hardest, and also those tend to be the most heavily litigated sometimes because the penalties are so severe, whether it's lifetime registration that's changing as a sex offender, or you also have the possibility that you're going to have young victims have to testify and confront their accusers. So those are all very difficult, challenging cases.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Hearing those cases can definitely be very emotionally taxing. How do you maintain that work-life balance?
I'm still figuring it out at 55. I've heard so many women speak on this issue, and sort of the general theme I hear is that you gotta sort of let go of the idea that you can do everything well all at once. At some point in your life, something's going to suffer a little bit, whether it's spending time with your children or outside activities or your health, or you try to balance it all and you do the best you can. I mean, I like to exercise. I was a lot better pre-pandemic. I'm better at a class when someone actually yells at me and tells me what to do, and there's peer pressure. When I have to do it on my own with a video, you can cheat a little bit. I've been trying to swim and do yoga. This is going to be recorded and but I do like to watch bad reality. And mostly, and people say, my husband always says, "You're so smart. Why do you do that?" Because I just want my brain to turn off. I do read a lot. I love crime thrillers, believe it or not. And then all my activities, my husband says that's my hobby. The work I do with the California Judges Association. We're trying to start a California Women Judges Association. I'm on a ton of committees. So that's what sort of keeps me sane and keeps me going.
Thank you for that. I also really love watching reality television. I would never admit in public to watch The Bachelor, but I religiously love watching the Bachelor franchise. But from that, I know you talked about what keeps you sane is also the committees that you're a part of. And our next question for you is, what is it like serving as the vice chair of the California's Judge Association's Committee on Diversity and Inclusivity? In your opinion, what does the legal field still need to work on in terms of diversity and inclusion?
What a great question. So that committee was really born out of George Floyd, because we have so many ethical constraints as judges in terms of what we can say publicly, what we can do publicly. There's some opinions out there, ethical opinions about if we can go to protests, and if so, can we stay there? What happens? And so, myself, but also a number of my colleagues were really, they are the mothers and fathers of young Black men and women, and they wanted to go to protests, and their children did. And because of the limitations that are placed on us, I think that a lot of my colleagues were feeling like we were in this unique position as bench officers because we are so constrained by what we can do, and obviously want to make sure that all the parties believe that we are being fair and objective. And so it was born out of this need and desire for us as a group to sort of talk about the issues facing all of us and our lived experiences and what we could learn from each other. And it really just exploded. I mean, we started out with two wonderful African-American colleagues, one from the North and one from the South, who were both presidents of their respective Black judges organizations. And then we moved on to issues affecting the Latinx community. And then we talked about, we have 3 Native judges in our state, and they made a presentation. And then we had presentations from LGBTQIA judges and Asian American judges and Jewish judges. And we just kept expanding. And then part 2 was intersectionality. And we just did a program last week on judges, addressing mental health issues. And so it's just been such an incredible experience. And Zoom, the only good thing I'm going to say about the pandemic, other than Instacart, is Zoom, because it gives us the opportunity to interface with our colleagues from Northern California and small counties. And I really got to meet a number of my colleagues all over the state that I would have never gotten to meet, and to learn from them and to grow from them. And it's just really been an incredible experience. And our chair, Elizabeth Macias, one of my very good friends from Orange County, and she's just such a rock star, but this has really been her baby. I just do what she tells me to do. But we've put on probably close to 20 programs in 2 years. It's really been an incredible journey.
That's amazing that you've been able to do that. And kind of going off of what you mentioned about the constraints that you faced there, after George Floyd and the protests that came after that, do you face any other limitations as a judge that you find particularly challenging?
Well, challenging, no. Understandable, yes. But my kids are always like, you can't do anything. You can't put a lawn sign on. You can't go anywhere. You can't say anything. And that's just, I think it's appropriate. I think our litigants should believe that their judges are objective and that they don't take political positions on issues or other things, and that they should feel that when they're before a judge, that their finger is not tipped on one side of the scale or the other. And so in order to look, our judiciary is under a microscope, understandably why. Some of my colleagues from around the state and other places make some decisions that I think cause people to question the legitimacy of our branch. And I think we owe it to the litigants to assure them that they're going to get a fair trial or a fair hearing. So it's incumbent upon us to do what we need to do and restrain ourselves to the extent that we need to give them that comfort. So it's a price to pay. It's a relatively small price to pay. It's funny. So when people ask me for political contributions, I can always say, well, we're living in the amount we can give, and we can only give a couple. And in terms of speaking engagements and things like that. So it's always there, but I think it's an important limitation, because I think it's so important to continue to maintain the perceived integrity of our institution.
Thank you for explaining the limitations that you face and being so candid about it. Our next question is focusing on law school. The next few series of questions we have are pertaining to law school too. This one is, seeing as that you went to UCLA Law, how was your experience at UCLA Law School? Was it what you imagined it would be?
I really had no idea what it would be, because remember, I thought I was going to China, and the next thing you know, I'm going to UCLA, which was great. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to age myself, but there was a series way back when, you guys can probably look it up, The Paper Chase. And it was about all these first years at Harvard. And it was all those sort of worst case scenarios, the Socratic method, the surly old professor, calling on someone and really sort of grilling them. And that's the only reference point I had to law school. UCLA was not like that at all whatsoever. We had an incredibly diverse class. Our oldest classmate was like 65. Our youngest was 18. They were from all over the place. It was pre-Prop 209, when diversity factors could be taken more into account by the school. So we had a very diverse, wonderful, amazing class. Wonderful professors. I mean, Kimberly Crenshaw, who's still there, and Chris Littleton, and Allison Anderson, really just some incredible professors. And so it was a great time. Public Interest Law Foundation, they did a lot of things. There were a lot of clinical opportunities. And then I somehow or other gravitated to a bunch of women who wanted to start a UCLA Women's Law Journal, and that's what we did. And I must say, clearly there was a need for it, because the female alumni and male community were incredible. And we put out a solicitation letter. The funds just came pouring in. I mean, we had great seed money in the beginning because so many of our alumni were and alumni AE were so desirous to see this get off the ground. So we had incredible support, and that was amazing. So it was a great experience. I just had my 30th reunion last Friday, and I was reminded of how incredible my classmates were. It was really incredible to see everybody and how well everyone's doing in their respective career paths.
That's so amazing. I'm glad you're able also to kind of reconnect with them after 30 years. Kind of following up on your experience in law school, when you went into law school, did you know like what type of law you wanted to go into, or was that, an interest that you had to develop over time when you got more experience on?
Yeah, again, no idea. None. I knew I liked to argue and I knew I liked to write. So I figured, I probably have the basic skills for this. And it's funny, he was a wonderful teacher and he passed, but UCC was my worst grade in law school, but he was such a lovely man. And then I went to a bankruptcy firm, which is kind of ironic. I think given how much of a rudderless ship that I was, A, I didn't know that I was going to be going to law school that soon, and B, didn't really know why I was there necessarily. And there were a lot of women in my class, but in terms of women mentors in the legal profession, either I didn't know to look for them or I just didn't know how available they were. So I didn't have a lot of mentorship and guidance. Like, I didn't even know you applied for a clerkship. I didn't know that was a thing until everybody was talking about it my third year when it was too late. And I was like, whoops, I guess I should have done that. So I had no idea. I guess is a very long-winded answer. That's when I went to the bankruptcy firm, I didn't know that it was any different from anything else. And then I went to another firm and worked on sort of general business litigation. And the only thing I found interesting were the labor and employment cases. So I kind of thought, well, maybe there's something that I want to do. Fast forward, I think I did one labor employment project my whole 3 years I was in private.
Thank you for that. I know you touched upon finding mentorship and how important it can be. So our next question for you is, because you said that you didn't have a mentor through your legal career, if you can go back and find a mentor, do you have any tips that some of our students who are in undergrad right now, when they're looking for mentors, they can take with them?
Sure. A couple of things. Do what you love. So join organizations. And if you see a speaker or have a program where someone comes, don't be shy to, see if you can follow up with them and just say, hey, I'd love to pick your brain at your convenience or take you to coffee back when we can do that or something like that, and establish those connections. Join organizations that you believe in and volunteer for programs, and whether it's working in a domestic violence clinic or a food bank or whatever, because you're going to cross paths with people who have similar interests, and then you're going to establish those networks. Look up people that you admire or find interesting. I mean, I love the internet. We didn't have the internet when I went to law school, but look them up. What organizations did they join? What schools did they go to? What projects did they work on? What companies did they work for? And that may give you some direction as to sort of where you want to pursue opportunities or mentors. And the other thing is, and I've heard this over and over again, all mentors don't need to be mirror images of you. They don't need to look like you. They don't need to act like you. They don't need necessarily to come from the same backgrounds as you, but they can still be mentors. One of my biggest mentors, as I said, is my former boss, Andre Barat. He was a wonderful mentor in terms of career development on the bench, balancing. He was a very engaged father. He had kids a little bit before me, and sort of work-life balance, those kinds of things. The other thing, and you're all very early in this, but I was thinking about this, and sometimes they mix, but you might want to have a couple mentors, right? There's your work mentor. There's your just life mentor. There may be when if you want to have kids, your mentor in sort of child rearing, which is a whole nother world unto itself. And sometimes those mentors kind of merge. So maybe you have a professional mentor who also becomes a parent mentor because they had kids a little bit older than you, but you may not just have one mentor in life. You may find multiple mentors, but join organizations, go to places, get out of your comfort zone, do things you love and you're passionate about, and you will meet people who will just by natural attrition just become your mentor, because they see you everywhere. They're like, oh, there she is again. We must have something in common. And they know that you're committed to the same types of issues and projects they are, so they may very well be willing to mentor.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that definitely can feel like an overwhelming process to find that mentorship, but joining organizations, getting involved in internships, jobs, whatever it may be, I think is definitely a great path in order to find those people and make those connections. Moving on to our next question, I wanted to ask you, how did your prior experience in legal field, whether it be in private practice or working for the Inspector General's office, how did that play a role in your current career as a judge?
Couple things. Something I said earlier that I'm going to revisit again. I mean, the legal community in Los Angeles County, as big as it is also really small. Like, for example, a partner at the very, very, very first firm I ever worked at when I was a summer clerk is now a judge. He came up behind me and he called me when he was applying, but he's on the bench. Two of the people I work with at my second firm are on the bench. The woman whose job I took when I was at the Inspector General's office is on the bench. I've had people who work for me want to use me as a reference and vice versa. Why do I say all this? I say all this is you don't have a second chance to make a first impression. So you never know where you're going to run into someone that may be across the table from you as the hiring partner or the hiring person or the director of HR or someone who's on a selection committee. And you want to make sure that every interaction you have with people, regardless of the setting, whether it's at the supermarket or, in line waiting for carpool pickup, that you're at your best. Now, I don't mean get all glammed up and all that. I just mean treat people nicely and respectfully and professionally, because you never know when you're going to run into someone. So why do I say that? I say that because I had multiple jobs in multiple arenas, and I'd like to think that I always gave people the impression that I was ethical, hardworking, dependable, and I was relatively intelligent. And so that way, when I applied for a new job or wanted to be on the bench, that they could give a good reference, or if they weren't willing to give a good reference, they certainly weren't going to say something negative about me. And when you apply to be a judge, it literally is like, this is your life. You have this huge questionnaire and you write every co-counsel and every opposing counsel and all of that. And then you give them a list of 75 references, but they also go outside the application. So I'm gonna give you a classic example. I had a friend, she became a friend. We were working on this project together when we were both in the gang units of our respective offices. I was at the city attorney. She was at the district attorney. We became very good friends and personal friends. And so I would spend some time at her home and her parents' home, and they lived in the Valley. So I got to meet her mom and her dad several times. Fast forward like 10, maybe like 8 years. I'm applying to be a judge. And at the time they used to have this super secret committee. Now it's not secret anymore, where you would have someone who would vet you. Someone from the super secret committee would vet your application. And the person who was on the super secret committee is now a Court of Appeal justice who happened to be best friends with the mother of this woman I work with. So the woman whose house I was at frequently was best friends with the person who was vetting. She was not a lawyer, but this justice saw her daughter's name on my application, called up this woman's mother and said, hey, do you happen to know Nicole Bershon? And she said yes, and she had nice things to say about me. If I had been a jerk at her house, she literally could have torpedoed my application. So that's a very long-winded way of saying the preparation is, I think it was good preparation, as it helped me hone my skills and my reputation. And it also kind of gave me an idea of not only what kind of lawyer I wanted to be, but what kind of judge I wanted to be. I always tried, whether I was a prosecutor or at the Inspector General's, to try and be free of bias, ethical, and professional, which I think are very valuable skills once you get on the bench.
Thank you for that. Now we're going to be transitioning to some of the questions that we got from the audience member.
Good.
And one of them was, I know that you mentioned and talked about how the legal community in Los Angeles is very small. but what made you know that you wanted to practice in California and not go to a different state?
So I went to college in New Jersey. And after dealing with those winters, which were relatively minor, I said, you know what, I'm done. I want to go back to California for law school, also because of the weather and all that. And my family was here. And I'm not going to do any kind of bragging, but also back then, law school tuition at UCLA was very, 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 very reasonable, especially when I was living with my parents. So again, I think you're sensing a theme from my remarks, not really having a 5-year or 2-year plan. I just kind of bungled along, and I got a summer job in California, and then I got another summer job in California the next summer. And then I had to go back to that first job from the first because I didn't have another job. And so I just stayed in California. However, when I decided I wanted to get out of at least bankruptcy at my second firm, I started looking, and I actually started interviewing in New York. And I went to a couple New York firms, and I remember the money sounding incredible. And I remember this partner saying, you know, I'm just going to tell you right now, you're just not going to have a life for like 3 years. Your weekends are our weekends, nights, weekend days. And I was sort of like, and also, even though I said I didn't want to do bankruptcy anymore, literally every firm I went to wanted to direct me to their bankruptcy department. So I had a friend who was working at the LA City Attorney's Office, a friend from college, not as a lawyer, but as something else. And he said, hey, you know, they're starting this domestic violence vertical prosecution unit. Would you be interested? I was, I'd be interested. It was right up my alley. Applied, got the job, never looked back. And also, I didn't want to take another bar, I'll be honest. Glad I'm here. Love the California legal market. Glad I stayed.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Another question that we got had to do with regards to legal jobs and legal internships, wanting to get experience before law school. Do you have any tips when applying for those positions and opportunities? How can they stand out in the application process?
Oh, that's a great question. So, and Reedy and I were talking about this because I know she was one. She externed for the Los Angeles Superior Court. I hope we're going to do that again this summer. It was a fabulous program, so I would urge you all to look into that. And you can reach out and send me an email, and I can follow up to see if we're going to be doing that again. Kind of the same thing I said, you know, start with the people. Are there people you admire? Where do they work? What do they do? What are they interested in? If you look on their resume and they say, hey, you know, we also volunteer at she volunteers at the Sierra Club, and you're interested in the Sierra Club, go volunteer at the Sierra Club, and maybe you may meet people, or if you see that they're going to speak, go to one of the events. And I have found, especially as it relates to students, if you go to an event for a specific speaker and you're interested in them and you're somewhat knowledgeable, not in a scary way, but that you follow them, know what their background, and you go up to them and just say, you know, I really admire you. And it's not just I really admire you, and they say why, and you can't respond, but like you're actually knowledgeable about why you admire them. 9 times out of 10, or maybe over 50%, they're gonna want to take the time to talk to you, at least for a minute. You can say, hey, you know, maybe you're busy now. Can I email you or follow up with you? And just if you have any ideas for me of, you know, this, where most people will take the time, especially if it's a UCLA alum. Use that UCLA alumni network. Seriously, Bruins like to help fellow Bruins. So especially if it's you know, hi, I'm UCLA class of, this is what I'm interested in. I bet you 9 times out of 10, they will at least take the phone call, the email, and they may say, hey, I don't have an externship, but my friend Judge Bershon at the Los Angeles Superior Court has an externship. Let me reach out to her. The other thing, for those of you who are interested in the law, I'm pretty sure, I'll double check, most of the diversity bar organizations have student memberships. I don't think they're limited to law students. I think undergrad too, but double check. And most of those memberships, if they're not free, they're really low cost. And then you get on their listservs, and then you get emails and newsletters about all the events that they're doing. There's Black women lawyers and Latino lawyers and Asian Pacific Islander lawyers, and there's an LGBTQ. I mean, literally Arab American lawyers, or Irish American lawyers, Italian American lawyers. All of these organizations have bar organizations, and you can join and go to their events and mingle and meet people.
Thank you for that. And for our members, we also have a biweekly newsletter that goes out that we have a lot of internship and scholarship opportunities on. So if you guys are ever interested in it, or even one of the guest speakers that we bring, if you want their email, we can contact them and ask if they're comfortable with us sharing that to you. But as Judge Bershon mentioned, just like feel free to reach out to us as like a club also, because we also have internships that we want to share with you. And that we try our best to routinely post. But our next question, one of our members asked is, I know that you mentioned talking about a work-life balance and that you're a mother. How do you balance being a mother and also being an attorney-judge?
So, you know that old expression, it takes a village? It really does take a village. And I don't want any of you to think when I say have a partner in this, that means like necessarily you have to have a spouse or a domestic partner, but the partner could be a parent or a friend or a neighbor or someone, because you can't really do, I mean, you can, but it's hard. And all admiration to single mothers and single fathers. I don't know how they do it. It is very difficult. One of my biggest heroes is she's a magistrate judge, Karen Stevenson, just such a rock star in the Central District. She was a single mother of twin boys while she was going through Stanford Law School. How I don't know how she did it. I think she had good family support, but you need to have your village. You know, I always joke with people, I'm like, just drown out. If your mother-in-law drives you crazy, I have a lovely mother-in-law, but if your mother-in-law drives you crazy, just like drown it out. Like just, you know, earmuffs, because if they're going to help you, if they're going to pick up your kid for soccer practice, wherever you need them, your brother, your friend, your neighbor, whatever it is you have. And it's almost like a bartering. It's like reciprocating. So like my next door neighbor is a partner law firm, single mom. Like when I can, if I have time off and I've picked her son up from school, she picks my son up from school. You try and help people out. And if you have a moment and you can offer to a friend, hey, can I help you out? Can I? Because they'll remember that and you have credit in that bank. And then when you need their help, they can help you. The other thing is, look, I can't speak to Fern Life now because I was there 30 years ago. It wasn't great. I've heard it's getting better. The reality is I went to government and it was much better in government. But you know, when I went to the LA City Attorney's Office, my supervisor was a woman. There were women supervisors all over the place. When I went to the Inspector General's office, I was an LAPD employee and I was subject to their maternity policy, which was basically you can take all your sick and all your vacation up to, I don't know, 6 or 9 months. Bottom line, I took 6 months off for my first daughter, fully paid, and 4 months off for my second daughter, fully paid, because I was working for the government. So you just have to find what works for you. I was also pregnant with my second daughter when I was the president of the Women Lawyers Association of Los Angeles. Not sure that was the best idea, but it, you know, I have a wonderful, supportive spouse who cooks and cleans and is great and was not working for part of the pandemic, which was incredible because I have 2 teenagers that have sports in 2 different places. And now he's back to work and I'm realizing I have to cook again and no one wants to eat my cooking. So we're doing a lot of ordering out. And you know what? I let that go. Like I'm okay at failing at certain things. Like I just, you know, I'm not the best dresser in the world and my kids weren't very well dressed at school, but as long as, you know, they had a top and a bottom, I figured we're good. There were certain things I just let go. I realized I can't be a perfectionist and everything. You just have to decide what works for you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. It definitely can be difficult balancing those two, but we're happy you're able to figure that out, even though it can be so difficult at times. We have another question from one of our members, and they ask, do you ever face criticisms for decisions you make in the court? And if so, how do you handle the consequences, or how do you handle it?
Oh, every day you're probably going to make someone unhappy. You know, in litigation and in adversarial systems, I don't want to say winners and losers, but there are people who get what they want sometimes, and people don't get what they want. And the people who don't get what they want all the time, sometimes they're not happy. And we also have people with various stages of mental illness, and we have people who are frustrated with the system, good, bad, or indifferent. And sometimes I become the focal point of that frustration, whether right or wrong. I have a really, 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 really thick skin. I do my best. I'd like to think I try not to take anything personally. So people have said some really horrible things to me, and I just don't take it personally, and I don't react. And if they're willing to apologize, I always say it is water under the bridge. No matter what, though, I'm not going to treat them differently in the sense of I'm not going to somehow or other not afford them their full constitutional and statutory rights because they were rude to me. I may say to them, you know, if you keep talking this way, I'm going to remove you from the courtroom, but your attorney's going to be here and you're going to get all the rights, or I may give them more chance, you know, but I don't penalize people for it. I don't punish them for it. And I have a very thick skin because that's what they pay us to do, is to have a thick skin. And it's great training to be a parent because you also need a really thick skin to be a parent. So there you go.
Thank you for that. Similar to how you said having a thick skin is important, one of our members asked, have you ever faced glass ceiling moments or maybe any sexism in the industry?
Great question. So I always talk about how, you know, here I am at UCLA, and I don't think it was 50% women, but it was close. And we had our UCLA Women's Law Journal, and all these firms were saying, come work for us. We have our women, and they would trot out their one woman partner, and they would say, we're a great firm and we're a family firm. So I just thought everything was great. You know, there never, and up until that point, I really hadn't encountered any issues. You know, my dad was very progressive. My mom worked outside the home. My dad knew Gloria Steinem. I got to meet her. Like I didn't really think me being a woman was an issue in 1989 when I got out of law school. And so when I got out of college. So the first firm I went to that summer, that first firm, one of my colleagues then, who's now a very good friend of mine, we go into this client meeting, and it's an initial client meeting where you sign the retainer and you try and figure out what you're going to do. And we had a male partner. And so the client, who had gotten the firm into bankruptcy in the first place, so not the best business person in the world, said, before we start the meeting, why don't we have the girls get us coffee? And I was kind of looking around, I'm like, oh, he's talking to us. And so I looked over at the partner and I gave him an opportunity to correct it. And to his credit, he did say, you know, that's not what they're here for. So I gave him a lot of credit. But that was like my first moment where I was like, oh, we're not in Kansas anymore. And then I go through law school, everything's great. And it took about another year and a half before the first time I was mistaken as a court reporter during a deposition. But I actually started to use that to my advantage because I felt like I didn't say anything, I didn't engage, and I let them sort of underestimate me. And that was kind of like my strategy, because they let their guard down, because they think, what is this girl know? What does she know? She doesn't, you know, and they let their guard down. And then it helped me strategically in my cases. And then, you know, again, I said I work for the city attorney's office, very progressive, a lot of female. Most of my supervisors were women. So really, again, you know, there are a couple of judges who are no longer on the bench who were good in the sense they made me realize that if I'm ever a judge, I'm going to make sure I don't treat people the way I'm being treated. And I actually there's a record that goes on in my head all the time when I have litigants before me, especially ones who haven't been in my courtroom before. I don't want them to think it's like a club, like that you're a new member to the club. And so all the people who've been in the club at the same time, now you're a new member and it's sort of us against them. So like with chambers conferences, sometimes I don't do a lot of chambers conferences, especially after COVID. But even when I used to, like, you know, if one of the parties was trying to sort of schmooze me up, I would always sort of put the stop to that, because I didn't want the other side to think that they somehow or other had a special advantage. And I did experience that a lot not a lot, but sometimes when I was a prosecutor, I'd go into the chambers of a male judge and a male attorney, and they kind of knew each other and they were schmoozing. And I was like, I'm not even in here. Don't even mind me. Don't mind me. You just keep on with your conversation. But again, those are the images that stay in my mind that remind me that's not who I want to be as a bench officer. And look, I mean, the reality is we need more women in leadership positions on the bench. I mean, we're doing a good job and these last few governors have been incredible about appointing more and more women and BIPOC women and people from all different backgrounds, and that's and diversity of professions too, more defense attorneys, more professors, and that's wonderful. But now that we're in the door, we also have to do a better job of training and developing people to expand the diversity in the ranks of leadership. I mean, it's interesting that we're now only going to have our third female presiding judge in our courts, 170-year plus history. I mean, it's great, and Samantha Jester as the first Black female presiding judge in our court's history is going to be amazing, but it shouldn't have taken until 2022.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences as a woman in the legal field. We do have one more question for you, which is what we like to ask after every single Q&A, which is, what are some of your parting words of wisdom for students, especially women who aspire to go into the legal field?
It's really simple and it sounds like high school. Just don't be a jerk. I mean, I don't like, there's no other way. Just be nice, treat people with respect, be fair, be ethical. As I said, again, you don't have a second chance to make a first impression. So you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but be prepared when you go to court, be courteous, be polite when you deal with people. If you become a lawyer and let's say you're a civil litigator and there's a discovery dispute and the other side asks you for a continuance, maybe you don't have to give it to them, but why say no? Like, be nice, just say yes. Just even if they say no, be the bigger woman, be the better person, because people will remember. People tend to remember two types of people: those who are extremely nice and extremely generous, and those who are extremely nasty and extremely rude. So you want to be the former, not the latter. And people remember that, and they will want to fight for you. They'll want to give you opportunities. They'll want to help you get a job if they know that you're a good person who is going to try to make the world a better place.
Thank you so much for telling us this, and I'm sure a lot of our members that are here with us or also watching the recording online later took a lot out of it. But once again, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming here and sharing all this advice.
Well, thank you, and thanks to both of you and to all of your members. You could reach out to Anna or Reedy. They have my email. I don't want to announce it publicly on the record, but they have my email address. Any of you feel free to reach out if you want more information about the court, about the judicial extern program. I'm happy. And I know a lot of people. I'm on a lot of organizations. I also teach at that other law school. So I'm happy to connect you with different people if you want. Feel free to reach out. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.